Is it sad that you can go a whole weekend without anyone knowing that you're dead? Even when you're surrounded by people that supposedly know you. Find out the answers to this and many more questions.
Because it's time for our Over Your Eyes podcast.
Weekend at Bernie's, starring Jonathan Silverman and Andrew McCarthy.
From 1989.
Hello, Holly.
Hi, Sarah.
I just celebrated Labor Day weekend, which is funny because this movie is set over Labor Day weekend. Did you realize that when you tested it?
No, I did not.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I know. I thought that too.
And it's really hot. There's heat waves just like in this movie. Anyway, yes. So Weekend at Bernie's, 1989. It's got your 80s crush, Andrew McCarthy.
Absolutely.
I liked Jonathan Silverman.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Jonathan Silverman girl over McCarthy, I would say. But
I understand that.
To each their own.
I look at his face and I think, why do I like your face so much?
Mm-hmm. That's how I feel about Andrew McCarthy, too.
That's how I feel about Andrew McCarthy.
Oh, were you talking about Andrew or Jonathan?
Yeah. Not Jonathan. No.
I know. And Andrew has like crooked teeth. And then I'm just like, good for you.
Mm-hmm.
You killed it at life.
He's great.
Questionable face and crooked teeth. But you're adorable. You pull it off.
Look at those eyes.
Look at those eyes. We've talked about him. His eyes, I still go back and forth on. Sometimes they just look too wild. He looks like wild-eyed and unpredictable a lot of the times.
I know. That's the appeal.
But it's like his face looks serene, but then his eyes are like, you never know what's really going on there.
Exactly.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
You just summed it up.
Yeah. I don't even know like where to begin. Like this movie just has such a reputation of being so well known, but so ridiculous. It's like, it's a joke without it being funny.
So you don't think this movie is funny?
I didn't think that it was, but then when I was watching it this time, I was like, I kind of am laughing at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
More just like some of the things before the hijinks ensued.
So I have some logistical questions.
Okay.
How long trigger warning about dead bodies?
Like a decomposition question.
I am going to ask a decomp question.
Mm-hmm.
How long is it before a body hits rigor mortis and also starts to smell?
That's a good question. I don't remember. I think rigor mortis doesn't take long. Like it will set in within 24 hours. And I think you'll start smelling pretty soon too. Within like 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends on your conditions. He was in air conditioning a lot of the time and had that fresh sea air. And I think the salt air and the salt water helps like preserve you more, like salted pork, you know.
Oh, good point.
That might help. Plus he drank like a lot, so he's kind of like pickled and preserved.
That's a good point. Okay, thank you. Now we can continue and I won't be obsessed with that anymore. Larry is Andrew McCarthy and Rich is Jonathan Silverman. Larry is sassy.
Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan Silverman is like the straight man.
Mm-hmm.
And they're working over the weekend. It's hot as hell in New York City. The roof is melting. So all of their stuff, including their boombox, is sticking to the roof. Rich notices a discrepancy in the books because they're doing accounting work. And he's like, we gotta go. We gotta go tell the big boss, Bernie. So they go and they tell Bernie. about it. And then Bernie, you can kind of tell that he's like, shit. They figured it out. He's like, hey guys, I'll tell you what. You come this weekend to the island. We're gonna party. We'll figure this discrepancy out. Then Bernie goes to dinner with these mob guys. Bernie says, I need you to off these two guys. While the mob boss's girlfriend has her foot in Bernie's crotch under the table. And I thought, this is something that happened a lot in the 80s. This like foot to the groin molestation power play in movies. Have you ever done that to anyone?
No, I don't think so. It does happen a lot in movies. And that will be a good question to ask.
Ooh.
Because it's like, how often is this going on? We've seen it in several movies so far. I don't know. I haven't had that. I definitely don't want that. Like, especially if I were wearing a skirt or something, I would just be like, please do not get your feet near there, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that it's the foot to the crotch under the dinner table while there's other people present at dinner is a real power move. And it's banking on the idea that you won't react out loud because you don't want to upset the table in a way that it seems like it's used in these movies with women to show a certain level of aggression in their character.
Yeah.
And that's the case here with the mobster's girlfriend. She is so obvious that she's having an affair with Bernie. Also, she was wearing cuffs, these like silk organza cuffs that were not attached to anything.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Did you notice that?
I did. I mean, it's kind of unique. I don't think I've ever seen that before. It's like the lace gloves kind of ruffle thing, but without the actual glove.
It's like a dickie for your arm.
Totally. I kind of like it now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's a bold fashion statement.
Well, she's a bold woman.
That is true.
She's not afraid of her mobster boyfriend at all. And Bernie freaks out and he leaves because Vito, the mob guy, is like, look, we don't do that anymore, Bernie. We're a legitimate corporation. And I was just thinking about how we were just talking about the Italian job.
Oh, yeah.
And how the mob was run like a corporation.
It's true. You were totally talking about that.
And he's like saying it. We find out that Bernie is actually getting set up because Vito knows that Bernie's having sex with his woman. Interesting aside, the woman in question gets mad when she thinks that Bernie's cheating on her.
Yes, of course.
But she has a boyfriend who's like the mob boss.
Yes, but it's different. It's just different.
That's another like big power move.
You're right. Who is more powerful, her or the mob boss?
Well, the mob boss is killing guys over her.
But keeping her. So yeah, she wins. You can look at that.
Except she has to live with herself.
Yeah. And something else we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then the tables turn on his hit that he's called out against Larry and Richard.
Meanwhile, Larry and Richard are grappling with Rich's crush on Gwen, the intern, who's leaving soon because she's an intern in college. And so it's like, you have to you only have like, Rich is running out of time.
Yeah.
And
Can
so
you please.
Oh, okay. So Richard is, oh, okay. Good one. He goes up to Gwen and he says, "My aunt is very sick." That's the first thing he says to her.
Yes. That part made me laugh. It's been like a long time. And then he finally works up the courage to talk to her because Andrew McCarthy, Larry, is like harassing him into it. And then he's like, okay, I'll do it. And he's like, hello, Gwen. And then she turns and's like, hello. And he just stares blankly and freezes. And then he says that. And it's so funny. It's like, makes no sense. It came out of nowhere. And then he just like stares at her and walks away.
And he doesn't have an aunt.
I don't even have an aunt. Yeah. I did find that funny.
Gwen and Richard go on a date. He takes her back to his place. His apartment is sweet. It's like,
oh my God. It's so beautiful. It's just basically like a mid-century modern preservation society designed their living room. It's so great. And the kitchen, all of it. It's just like never been touched since the 60s or late 50s. And then she's really impressed. Like, I was wondering how they were going to play it. I was wondering if they were going to make it like that the apartment was like crappy because it looked old. But then he's like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to redecorate. And she's like, no, it's great. It's like really hip or something. Mm-hmm. So even then, like mid-century modern was still cool. At that point, it wasn't even as old, but it's just so classic. But then we find out that it's actually not his apartment. It's his parents. Because he still lives with them, but he's too embarrassed to tell her.
And he told her that his parents died.
Mm-hmm.
So he's lied about all his family. His aunt is sick. His parents have died. I was like, none of this is true.
Yeah.
And this guy has some serious family issues he's not addressing. Then a guy comes walking out in his underwear and gets something out of the refrigerator to drink. Richard pushes it a little too far when he tells his dad to lay out a suit. Mm-hmm. Because Richard tells Gwen that his dad is the butler. Thus far, we have a guy who's told you that his fake aunt is sick, his live parents are dead, and that he has a butler.
This is all within like 24 hours. Like so many lies.
So she's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I don't blame her. I'm on her side for sure. Yeah. I was like, I can kind of, let it pass that he would lie about living at his parents, like just trying to take her back to that apartment because he was embarrassed. But then once you like lie that your parents are dead, it's like, and he said they died in a train accident. And then she's like, I thought planes would be more dangerous. And he was like, actually, a plane fell on the train. And then she's like, oh. And then she starts making out with him, like sympathy make out or something.
Exactly.
So that makes it even worse. And then it's like, well, obviously you're basically telling her that you don't have any intentions of getting serious with her, because if you're telling her that your parents are dead, how are you going to explain that later if you ever want her to meet them or get married? You know what I mean?
It just sounds like I want to get in your pants before you go back to college.
Exactly.
Which is fine, but be honest about it. I didn't like Richard because of this scene. Mm-hmm. And I remembered like the whole movie being like, oh, I kind of don't like him.
good.
Even though Larry's like outwardly kind of boorish
Hmm.
and but he's so dorky that it's kind of not serious. I don't know. Larry is an interesting character because, like, at one point, him and Rich are walking down the street, and there's a mugger who jumps out, and Larry just pushes him out of the way. Get your ass out of here. It's too hot. And he just pushes him out of the way. And he's got like a knife or something.
Hmm.
So Larry doesn't really have fear of the outside world the way Richard does. Like Richard's more prone to anxiety.
Hmm.
And this comes into play a lot because it makes it to where Larry seems more clear-headed when they get to the island and they go to Bernie's house
Hmm.
and they find that Bernie has died peacefully and that there's a syringe and like heroin in his pocket. Richard is freaking out and Larry's like, now wait a second here.
Hmm.
Let's think about this to our advantage. Aren't you sick of getting taken advantage of?
Hmm.
Like, why
Yeah,
can't we cut a break?
that was, I love that part because, yes, they got invited out there, like, supposedly as the reward for finding the accounting error. But really, like you said, it was to get the setup for them to get murdered. But they were really looking forward to partying with all these rich people and finally like living the good life. And they get there and they find him in the chair. They think that he's just like partied too much. And they're like, whoa, it's not even dark out. And he's already wasted. And they're like, let's get you some coffee. And they drag him over to the couch and they still don't realize that he's dead because he's pretty fresh at that point. And he has like a smile on his face because he died like while being injected with a bunch of drugs. Um, and then when they realize he's dead, then Larry's like, why does this always happen to me? Why do things like this always happen to me? It's so great. There are so many people like that can just have the art of making everything about themselves. And he's like, we were supposed to have a fun weekend and now he's ruined it. And he promised us a ride back to the city. Now how am I going to get home?
I know. It's so terrible.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it's the 80s generation.
Hey, that's funny because that sums up, I have a sums up the 80s quote, which is when Bernie is going to his boat, he throws money at the dock guy and says, buy yourself a girlfriend. And I thought that sums up the 80s. But you know what's interesting is that by the end of this movie, they're dragging, because like, okay, so Rich is interested in doing the right thing. And like he's got ethical concerns about the accounting. And that's his primary concern going into this. Larry wants to party.
Mm-hmm.
And Larry is continuously impressed by all of the accoutrement of wealth that Bernie has. And he keeps being like, oh, you know, he's so great. And like he has a boat and he's got fancy booze and he's got these like girls coming in, borrowing his boat, and he's got all of this stuff. I want to be just like Bernie, really. When I grow up, that's kind of where Larry's attitude is. But by the end of the movie, Larry's appalled by everything that was in Bernie's life. He's like now dragging around this dead corporate horse and it's like the end, it's 1989. These guys, these working stiffs that are trying so hard to get up the corporate ladder, discover that the ladder is rigged.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way they can survive is to abandon their ethics and drag this literal dead weight around for safety.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it's just a stupid movie. I would say primarily it's just a really stupid movie.
Oh, it's good. You found like a message in there. The corporate corpse.
Yeah.
They could have called this movie Working Stiffs.
Ooh.
Bernie never got stiff. Wait, except we'll talk about that later.
Oh. Okay, so Bernie never gets rigor mortis all weekend long. This goes on for like 3 days where they're dragging him around. So by the second day, Larry is like, you know what? It's cool. I'm going to rig him up so that it looks like he's waving to people walking by on the beach. And I'm also going to whip his ass at Monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
So Larry is playing Monopoly with his dead boss, having his dead boss wave at people on the beach. They turn Bernie into a puppet.
We kind of have to talk about
The
girlfriend
hitman
part, I guess. Yeah. So well, the hitman that was waiting for Bernie, and then he injected him with the heroin and then placed the syringe and the heroin in his coat pocket to make it look like he overdosed. That was the plan.
And he left the island. But Vito had sent another guy to follow his girlfriend. So his girlfriend appears on the island.
So we know that she had already told Vito she was going to visit her family or something for the weekend because she had planned to spend the weekend at Bernie's. But then he kind of squashed that plan. But she shows up anyway. So she takes the ferry all the way to his house just to have sex. That's extreme, I feel like.
Well, her character it's like they gave her the personality of a mobster dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's just going to get laid.
Yeah.
Like she's horny. That's all she fucking cares about.
Mm-hmm. Which is good for her. I just feel like she needs to have someone like on land, on the mainland too. That could be more convenient if that's all you want. But there's something about Bernie that she just can't get enough of. So she ferries her ass over there. She's drunk. And then she is like, Bernie, I know you're cheating on me. And then she comes in and she's expecting to find him like cheating on her. And then she sees Larry and Richard and she's like, where is he? I'm going to kill him. And they're like, he's not here. And then she's like, I'm going to tear this house apart. And then she comes out with a knife and she's like, I'm going to find him in the bedroom and he better be alone. And then she goes into the bedroom and we see her take off her like trench coat. She's wearing like a sexy outfit. And then she's up there for apparently 30 minutes and she is having sex with him.
With Bernie, who's dead.
With dead Bernie. I mean, I don't know of like, maybe that was the first place rigor mortis started. Penis. And so it worked out. And like, while she's doing it, there's all these big windows. And so the other mob guy that had followed her can see her go into the room and he hears all the noises. And he's like, calls Vito and he's like, Bernie's not dead because she just had sex with him for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then Larry and Richard are downstairs and they're like, what is she doing up there? And then she comes down and she's all like scatting, like, she's all like smoking and she asked for a scotch and she's super satisfied. And they're just like, what happened? How did this happen? And then they eventually laugh about it. But I'm like, okay, so there's necrophilia as like a joke. I don't think I've ever seen that in any other movie. Have you?
I haven't.
And then she said, they're like, how's Bernie? And she's like, better than ever. He's like, better. He's dead.
See, that's the punchline. That's how much this guy sucks. See, I actually think the whole punchline of this movie is that Bernie sucks. He sucks so bad as a person that his girlfriend doesn't know he's dead when she's having sex with him. And everybody that he hangs out with, all of his friends, don't know he's dead either because he's such a fucking bore. Because all he cares about is money.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a theme.
When Vito's girlfriend says better than ever, that Bernie was better than ever, I feel like that's the joke. Like, if she hadn't said that, it wouldn't have been funny. It just would have been awkward. But because she said that, it like made the joke on Bernie and not on her.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you could, because that scene could have been played in a very misogynistic way. And I didn't really feel like it was. I felt like it was making fun of Bernie. And yeah, sure, we're making fun of a dead guy, but he's a dead guy that steals money from an insurance company. So probably from people that needed the money that were paying into the insurance company.
Oh, he made the money by filing like extra life insurance claims. So by like pretending to be dead.
Yeah.
And now look at him. Pretending that he's dead.
Exactly.
Okay. That's karma.
It's like just desserts to this greedy corporate pig.
There's someone that Bernie reminds me of, and I could not figure it out. He kept reminding me of someone. Do you have it in mind?
No, but I know what you're talking about because I had the same feeling.
Yeah.
Like, who is he reminding me of? And I couldn't figure it out either.
I know. It's someone who's like pretty well known. I feel like a pretty common faced actor. For a minute, I thought like George Clooney.
Wow.
Like 80s George Clooney.
You think very highly.
Just like his mannerisms, not like his looks. Bernie's hot as hell.
Okay, but can we do a reboot of Weekend at Bernie's where George Clooney plays Bernie?
He might do it. He's got a pretty humor. And then, okay, so while I'm talking about people who remind me of people, I've already said that Andrew McCarthy, I think, is like pre-Chandler kind of. There's some Chandler-esqueness about him. I feel like
Chandler?
Oh, from Friends.
What?
There's something like sometimes in his motions and the way he answers things. I think he kind of reminds me of Chandler, or like his facial expressions.
Huh. Which one's Chandler?
Could you be? I can't do it.
I know which one's Joey. Joey is
Perry. He's the one that's like, could you be any more clueless about who Chandler is? He's the like snarky one. Like Ross is the nerd, Joey's the snarky.
Okay.
And then Jonathan Silverman reminds me of Michael Cera from Arrested Development. Not the looks, but like the way they talk.
Wow.
If you just like listen to his voice and watch his mannerisms, it's very like like Michael Cera watched some Jonathan Silverman when he was growing up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like he
think about it next time and you'll see.
Okay. Will there be a next time?
The next time you see Michael Cera or the next time you see Jonathan Silverman, there will be a next time. Because someday we're going to do Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and he's in it as like a little baby Jonathan Silverman. And that's probably why I like him. He's actually like kind of an asshole in that movie.
I feel like Rich is like the guy you really need to watch out for. Not Larry.
I can see that too. Like watching it as an adult, it's like red flags everywhere. And Larry's like upfront about his flaws and if they're even flaws. Like Larry's just upfront and that's fine.
Larry's like, hey man, I want to get laid. I'm on vacation. There's a lot of ladies around. At one point, Larry goes up to this lady.
This is my favorite. This is my quote.
And he says, oh, do you want to say it then?
Oh, okay. So it's the party, and there's this woman who looks probably like, I'd say almost like middle age. She's not like one of the like teens or young women in a bikini. She's just like,
she's hot
and chilling out.
Yeah.
She looks like fully dressed, just like confident and cool with herself. And then Larry spots her from across the room and he's like, yeah, I'm interested in her, which is cool. I liked that. And then he goes and sits down next to her. She's smoking. And so he pulls out a cigarette and he's like, hi, I'm Larry. And she's like, fuck off, Larry. And he's like, okay. And then he leaves. It was so great.
See, that's what I like Larry too, because he's like, okay, bye. I can read the room. I feel like Richard might have like tried to convince her that he was a nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he would be like, oh, I can't believe you're talking to me this way after my dog just died. Like some story to get her to stick around.
Exactly.
And then he's like, you want to come up to my bedroom and look at pictures of my dog that just passed away? And then he tried to like get her in bed. That's Richard. There's more to Richard than meets the eye. Like, I feel like it will come out later.
He lies very easily.
Too easily. They're not good, but he does it easily.
It's his instinct. If your instinct when you get anxious is to lie, that's a really bad habit, whether you mean it or not. Like whether your intention is that it's malicious or not, or if you're like, I can't help it. He's kind of like, I can't help it.
The lies just fly out of my mouth to the person that I love.
But then he flies down the stairs of the lighthouse.
Nice.
When he's on a date with Gwen, because of course Gwen's at the beach.
Yeah, because her parents are rich and they have a place in the Hamptons too. Which he probably wants her even more than that, and he knows that. Yeah, so they go on their date. So that's one of the reasons that they don't call, because like when they find Bernie dead, then all of a sudden, while they're trying to figure out what to do, the party, like the roaming party that makes its way up and down the beach, comes to Bernie's, because they say it always ends up at Bernie's. And then so they're like, oh God, what do we do now? All these people are here. And then they realize no one can even tell he's dead because everyone's talking to him and partying with him and they think it's fine. And so Larry's like, let's just do this for like a little bit longer. And Richard's like, okay. But then they finally get to the point where they are going to call the police. But then Richard sees Gwen and he's like, oh, wait, now I can't call the police because I have to try to like work this to my advantage to get Gwen. So the lies continue. It's nothing. It's a relationship built on a house of lies.
It's not something I would be comfortable with.
No. It's just like the whole weekend is just like deception. So he's like, oh, okay, well, let's move Bernie so I can like leave Gwen for a while and she doesn't find out. And then they go to the lighthouse, like you said. And then they're going to make out on the beach. And then suddenly Bernie had fallen over the balcony before they left. And then suddenly Bernie like washes up next to them on shore. And so Richard's like, and he can't let Gwen see. So then he stops making out with her and is like, we got to get you home. You're going to get a cold. And so lies. And then there's more lies.
He lies the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, to her, a lot.
Meanwhile, the mob hitman thinks he's going nuts. But then he came back And Bernie attacked the hitman because he fell and attacked him. And then another time he kneed him in the nuts.
Yeah.
Every time Polly sees Bernie does something accidentally, obviously, because he's a corpse. That convinces Polly that he's like fighting or defending himself, or, you know, and then he shoots him over and over again. And at one point, they discover, after Bernie gets washed at sea and they have to drag him back up to the house, they wash him off and like vacuum and stuff. And they realize that he has a hairpiece. So he's wearing a toupee. So then they staple it onto his head.
I know.
And I thought, in this moment, I'm watching a movie where two guys are stapling a toupee onto a dead man's head. And it reminded me of Scrooged. Yeah. When Bill Murray was like wanted to staple the antlers on the mice.
That's exactly what I thought of too. Yay. Yes, that's a great scene.
You know who was originally supposed to play Bernie?
Bill Murray. It was actually called Weekend at Bill Murray's. Then he declined to be in Scrooged.
So it's like the next day, and they had to clean him off again. And then they were like, okay, we really got to like call the cops. Like, we can't keep doing this. He's a dead body. And then, to prolong it in the script, the guys Larry and Rich find the letter that Bernie wrote that he put in a suitcase with $100,000, where they were like going to stage, I guess he was going to stage an accident, and that was going to be left there as evidence. And to kill Larry and Rich. So then they hear the tape. I guess Bernie taped the conversation that he had with the hitman earlier. And he was like, don't off these guys while I'm there. Make sure I'm not around. And so Larry and Rich are like, well, now we really have to keep Bernie around because this hitman's out to get us. Because they don't know. They just think Bernie overdosed. They don't realize that it was a hit. Right. That Bernie was murdered. It keeps the Bernie there longer with them. It gives them an excuse to keep Bernie around, because now they're in panic mode and they think that they're just being hunted. When in reality, yeah, the hitman is there, but he's actually still hunting Bernie because he thinks that Bernie's like a vampire or something. So,
right. More vampires.
Right. So,
yeah. Because then they could be worried that because then if they call the police and it's found out Bernie's dead, then they're just like targets. Even when they get back to the mainland, then they would never be sure when the hitman was going to come for them.
Yeah. And they're trying to figure out how to leave Bernie to be found dead so that they aren't involved or around, because they don't want to get questioned by the cops either.
Yeah, I don't blame them at this point. There would be lots of questions by this point.
The first and foremost in my mind as a detective would be, why does he have a toupee stapled to his head?
Exactly.
We know this happened post-mortem.
I plead the fifth.
I guess Larry and Rich could say that whenever Vito's girlfriend came over, that she stapled it back on or something. I guess they could blame everything on her.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. After she had her time with the dead body. He stapled his hair back on. Yikes. Bernie was going to make it look like a murder-suicide.
Yes.
Of the two. And then they find the note, and then Larry reads it, and it's like written from Larry's point of view. And it says something like, "Oh, I was stealing this money to pay for my sex change operation, and Richard doesn't love me, and if I can't have him, no one can," or something like that. Right?
Yes.
And then Larry's like, "Man, why does he have to make up stuff about us? It's bad enough he was going to kill us, but now he's like making up lies about us and putting them in a romantic relationship, which they're just friends."
Yeah. And then he was like, "Well, why do I have to be the drag queen?"
Mm-hmm.
And I
Which
thought,
is like, that's not what drag queens are, but
it's not, but it's also, I thought it was better than using the word transvestite.
Listen, I know.
Or like other words that never sound like they're coming from an okay place when they're said.
In the bathroom, like listening while I was taking off my nail polish, and I like when it got to that point, I like looked at myself in the mirror and made a face like, "What is he gonna say?" And then he said drag queen. And I was like, okay, that's acceptable. Misguided, but
that was extremely gentle in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sure, they could have just like made it a different thing. So part of the joke was that like, oh, haha, he was going to make you look like you wanted to be a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like that isn't one of the bravest fucking things you could ever do as a human being.
Exactly.
They could have made that feel very hateful.
Mm-hmm.
So all things considered, it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
True. Very true. Yeah. So all that's happening. And then at some point, Richard does tell Gwen that Bernie's dead. But then for some reason, then they like have to keep him around, and then they take him out on the boat, and everyone sees him out on the boat. And apparently he like falls partially overboard at some point. It's just like banging against metal buoys or something. And
yes.
Yeah. And then Gwen sees them dragging his body back in to his house. And she's like, wait a minute, I thought he was dead. So she comes in to confront Richard and is like, hey, Richard, you're really scary at this point. What's extremely. You lied to me about our boss being dead, and now you're carrying around his body. What's up? And then at that time, then the hitman comes back to like put his final kill, and he does some kind of like hex or curse on Bernie because he thinks Bernie's like, you said, a vampire or some kind of magical undead creature at this point. And then after he shoots Bernie, he sees them and he tries to shoot them. And it's like, also, Richard doesn't do anything to try to protect Gwen. Okay, at all. And it's like, it's your fault that she's in this situation. He just stands there, and then when the gun is empty, then they just run, and he's like, Gwen, run. And I'm like, you're failing left and right.
Yeah. It's so bad.
It's so bad.
He's like the worst beach date ever.
Totally.
He can't even stay in a lighthouse properly.
They, like, Gwen and Richard escape upstairs or something, and then Larry ends up being able to kind of hog tie the hitman with a telephone cord. Another benefit of landlines, you couldn't do that these days.
No. What would you use?
They would have all died today because there wouldn't have been a landline to wrap him up with.
Yeah, you're right.
A whole different ending. And then, so he's wrapped up, then they come down, and they've already called the police at that point, right? But it's like taking forever for them to get there. And then like the gardener and like the maintenance man come bursting out of a closet that they'd been locked in, and Gwen's like, what the hell is going on out here?
Could you imagine if you were approached by some guy at work? He tells you his aunt's sick, his parents died in a train accident, Then you find out he actually lives with his parents. So he doesn't have an aunt. He's dragging your boss's corpse around everywhere. He fell through a lighthouse, trapdoor, and he doesn't even bother to push you out of the way when somebody's firing a gun.
And there are two men locked in a closet. Yeah. That's a lot to overcome.
First impressions.
Yeah.
A good test is if you find that Richard's behavior is acceptable for dating, please get therapy. Because you have some severe boundary issues.
That's good advice. Like, even one of these things should have sent you running forever. And it's like compiled. You should never talk to him or look at him again.
No.
Just have
a fling. Just have a fling with Larry before you go back to school, and then don't worry about it.
Exactly.
That's my advice.
That's good advice. And then, like, take pictures and send them to Richard to torture him. Be like, what do you get for lying, Richard?
That concussion you got rolling down like 3 flights of stairs wasn't enough.
That was actually hilarious.
It was.
Top of the lighthouse. And then he's like, how do these things work? And he stares directly at the bulb of the lighthouse, which is like brighter than the sun. Like, how stupid are you? And she's like, look out, don't stare at it. And then he's like, I'm blind.
Oh my gosh.
Down the trapdoor and rolls down all these stairs. It was funny.
It was great. Then Polly gets taken off in a straitjacket.
Oh, right.
Because he's still insisting that Bernie's alive. And then Bernie rolls off of the cart down the ramp to the beach, at which point he lands sitting kind of upright in a way. Like he's just lounging about on his side, right by Larry and Rich and Gwen. And that's,
then they get up and run.
Yeah. And then that little boy who I thought you might love comes back and is like, he's like, hey, mister, can I bury you?
Okay, this is their opening for Weekend at Bernie's Part 2. And then I'm like, how did they get away with that? And then I thought, do I care enough to watch it? And then I thought, no. I don't think I'll ever watch it. Maybe I'll watch the trailer just to get like highlights to remember how did they come up with the plot for this.
Right. I don't think I saw it.
I don't know. I feel like I did.
Maybe I did, though.
Yeah. I think it came out like 92 or 93 or something. Like they waited a while. Yeah. So, and that's the end.
Yeah.
And so the moral of the story is, I don't know.
Don't be greedy.
Or you'll end up dead.
With a toupee stapled to your head.
That's the worst part. So funny. So after all that happens and when everything's wrapping up, then Richard and Gwen walk out hand in hand. And it's like, where did anything get resolved for her that made it okay for her to be holding his hand? He was like, you don't understand. We had to keep him around because of the hitman. But it's like, okay, that might be true. But then I need to know more. And you've still done a lot of things that make it not desirable for me to like date you or hold hands with you or stay with your parents. She's like invites him to stay with her parents at their house for the summer. And it's like, what? She's still in college, so she's very young. So I'll give her some leeway, but
yeah. Well, I think like Gwen thinks that Rich is attractive. So she's already attracted to him. and that sometimes these kind of hijinks can come off as like charming or exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that it's easy to be susceptible to that when you're in your teens and 20s, early 20s, especially with
Yeah.
guys. There's a demonstration of exuberance in the world that can be very appealing because it's a very particularly masculine feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that the guy that you're with is like adventurous
Yeah.
can feel exhilarating for many reasons. Even so much as maybe that you think that you feel safe around them because they seem like, well, they're so willing to take risks, then they would risk themselves for me.
But clearly we know that's not true because he ran. Basically like pushed her in front of the hitman while he ran. Maybe she
Right.
just wants to freak her parents out by bringing this freak home for the summer. Like she probably hates her parents or something. And this is her revenge. I'm gonna go with that. The other part of the movie that actually made me laugh out loud. I don't know. There were a couple of parts in the beginning where I like actually laughed, and I was like, "This is funny."
Mm-hmm.
There was this. I had a Skeet Ulrich sighting at the pool during the party. Did you see him? Skeet Ulrich from Scream.
I didn't know what his name was though, but I was like, isn't that guy like gonna be big in the 90s? He's like a big 90s guy.
He was wearing like one cross earring and he had like a mullet.
Skeet.
Skeet, and his name is Skeet. So this movie is rated 16 plus on Amazon, which I was like, that seems extreme, doesn't it? But it says like for nudity.
I mean, yeah, but Sarah, there is necrophilia. There's a necrophilia joke in the movie that involves necrophilia.
It's true. There were times when they were talking about how like shitty Larry's apartment was. And they were joking about the cockroaches, which is like a running theme joke about apartments, especially in New York in the 80s. And then Richard's like, it's got wall-to-wall cockroaches, like instead of wall-to-wall carpet.
Right.
And there was something else. But I really thought it was funny when they were trying to make it to the ferry for the weekend. And then Larry's like, the ferry's leaving. We've got to make it. We're going to miss all the good parties tonight. And he's like, come on, we can make it. And he's like running and pushing everyone out of the way. And they like jump across. They jump from the dock across the water and like hang on to the boat and make like a crash landing on the boat. And then they realized the boat was actually pulling into the port, not leaving. That cracked me up.
Yeah,
everyone just staring at them like, why did you guys just rush to get on the boat that was arriving?
That was amazing.
It was good.
They really gave it their all.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked whenever they were at Bernie's party and there's these torsos and Tony.
Oh yeah.
Is that what the shirt said? Torsos and Tony?
Torsos by Tony.
Oh, torsos by Tony. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the torsos by Tony guys walk by and they tell Andrew McCarthy, hey dude, you need to pump some iron.
Oh my God.
I thought that was really funny because later when you see one of the guy in the torsos by Tony shirt, you see him later and he's really scrawny.
Mm-hmm.
It's really funny.
Yeah, the blonde one, it was scrawny. Pump some iron.
That cracked me up. And then my favorite just general quote was when Vito, the mob boss, said, I give problems. I don't get problems.
I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Andrew McCarthy does a great job in this movie.
I think so too. I think he always does.
Yeah. So I thought this movie was gonna be dumb, and then I was gonna be like, oh God. You know, I'm sitting through this movie. I liked it as a kid. I thought it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched it, and I actually still think it's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole concept of the movie is funny, and I think just the fact that it got made is hilarious.
It is funny.
The fact that there's a sequel is also hilarious, even though I have no recollection of it.
Yeah. Is Andrew McCarthy in the sequel?
They are all.
Oh my God.
It's the original cast. They were all on board for
that. Okay. Well, that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Maybe we could do the sequel for Patreon.
I don't know. Maybe someday. I need a break. It was better than I thought it was going to be, though. There were times when I was just like, okay, enough of these like corpse antics. I had to walk away for a second and just listen. And then that's when I missed things. But in the beginning, I was like, this is funny. I'm actually enjoying it. And then I kind of like, I'd say like the first half or so, I was like, all right.
Yeah.
And then after a while, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I get it.
They could have shaved 18 minutes off.
18?
Yeah.
Very specific. Yeah, I agree.
I'm like an asshole backseat movie editor.
Yes. You can do the remake.
I just re-edit.
Yeah. The director's cut. The backseat director's cut.
You know what though? If I was gonna do that, I would film it. I would put it on the movie on the TV, and then I would film it onto my phone, and then I would edit it from that.
That'd be great. Okay, I did have like just a few bits of trivia that I thought were
go for it.
So one of them is when we were talking about how he says, you know, oh, my parents are dead and this is my apartment, and that guy in his underwear is my butler. Mm-hmm. The guy playing Richard's dad was actually the movie's director.
That's hilarious.
He came out in his underwear. Director Ted Kotcheff. Isn't that funny? And then since the director was playing that scene, then Andrew McCarthy directed that scene. I love that one.
That really cracks me up. It's also funny because in Richard's life, his dad is still in charge of his life because he lives with his dad. Mm-hmm. And it's the director of the movie who's in charge of everything in the movie.
Yeah.
So it's like a self-reference.
Inception.
I feel like there's a lot of self-reference in this movie, which is why I think it's probably why maybe I think it's funnier than maybe a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. Because I actually think this movie's really hilarious.
I think you just, have to go into it lightly and just go with the flow, and then you can just laugh at it. Like it's laughing at itself. And when you know that, then it's better.
Exactly. And not only that, but they're literally, okay, so you know whenever people say like beating a horse, a dead horse.
Beating a dead horse, yeah.
Okay, well, in Weekend at Bernie's, the joke is that it's a dead guy that they're carrying around and acting like he's alive. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the movie, they're literally beating a dead Bernie. which is like a reference to what they're doing to the joke of the movie.
Whoa.
Which is also hilarious.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're right. Layers. Nice.
And the ultimate joke, which is that rich guys don't know how to fuck. Or party. That's the real joke here.
Oh my God.
Bernie sucks so bad at partying. He's got to have all that money or nobody would want to hang out with him. And that is case in point being that nobody notices that he's a corpse.
Yeah.
At the party or in bed.
Right. Yeah.
Love it.
That's a message and a half. Okay. I have like just a couple other bits of trivia that are interesting. Originally for a minute, they thought about making this a vehicle for Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. Yeah. But then they decided to go with the older leads for like a different take on it.
Yeah.
But that would have been good.
I also feel like, though, that would have taken on a really sinister vibe later, considering what happened to them.
Okay. It's good that it didn't happen then.
Or it could have like set them on a different path where they didn't dress up like Michael Jackson or die because they took too many drugs when they were younger.
Sliding doors. We'll never know. What we do know is that Andrew McCarthy was actually reading for the part of Richard, but then when he read the script, he liked Larry better, so they gave him Larry.
See, we're not the only ones that don't like Richard.
Exactly. Okay, I think there's like two more. So speaking of beating a dead Bernie, it said that like the stuntman playing Bernie received injuries, including 2 or 3 broken ribs. Most of them occurred while he was being dragged through the water bouncing off of metallic objects. And it's like, yeah, I think that would do it.
So that was like a real person?
That was a person.
Oh my God.
Why did they use a person?
Why?
I need to watch that scene again.
Would you use a person?
I mean, of all the times to not use a real person.
Nobody would have noticed. Cut to that stuntman sleeping with the director's wife. And the director's like spying through the window. And he's like, I know what I'm going to put you through tomorrow.
Yeah. And they actually used the stuntman. They're like, we really need the stapling the toupee to your head scene to look authentic. And they made the stuntman do it with real staples. Yeah, that was a real person getting their ribs broken, bashed into metallic objects. So unnecessary.
Wow.
But
incredible.
It's given me a lot of laughs.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think that's
finding it.
There are more, but that's the best one to end on.
I love that you do the trivia.
There's actually a lot of these. I do have to say one more thing because the song to the movie was so annoying to me. It was like this generic, like it sounds like it would be playing at like Disney on one of their like tropical themed rides or something. It's like so trying to be tropical sounding. It's just like some like it hot, ooh, some like it cold. Oh, some never know. It's like the same thing you hear through the whole movie. And then I saw that the original title of the film was going to be Hot and Cold. So I feel like they had already paid for the song. They changed their minds and were like, fuck it, we're using the hell out of the song. And that's what they did. And we had to listen to it.
They didn't want to be like, Weekend at Bunny's. Where's all the earnings? Like that.
Oh God.
That like faux white reggae. Also, just as an aside, like Sting's doing a fake Jamaican accent as his singing voice.
Jaffakin Sting. According to Holly.
Weekend bunnies.
Woo, woo.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know if anybody has ever had a lasting relationship with a pathological liar.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not me, but yes.
You're like, yeah, let me tell you all about it. Only on Patreon.
I don't know. Maybe in undergrad I did, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Tell us about it at coverizepodcast@gmail.com. Good times.
Yeah. Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. Please, if you liked it, let us know. You can rate, review, and subscribe if you want. If you don't, that's okay. We do have a Patreon where Holly's always like posting amazing items, working hard for the money. And it's entertaining. I enjoy it.
Thank you.
You do a great job.
Thank you.
Yes. So yeah, there's stuff on there that you don't hear here, and it's all very good. And I don't know, that's it. We have a good time making it. We hope you have a good time listening. We appreciate you listening. And Holly, I appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you too, Sarah.
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys later. See you next Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
A year has passed since I wrote my note. He does that. You're right. Thank you for listening to Cover Your Eyes.
Perfect.